Well, thank you everyone for being here today. I'm very excited to share a little bit about the work that we're doing at Public Counsel around integrating social work in asylum cases placed with pro bono attorneys. And thank you so much for the introduction, but I'll say hello again. I'm Judy Verduzco, Director of Social Worker, and I'll let Carrie say hello briefly as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm a social worker with Public Counsel's Immigrants' Rights Project and our Pro Bono Asylum team. Great to see you all.
Next slide. So before we jump into the topic that we're going to spend most of our time discussing, wanted to offer up a brief Public Counsel overview. I know our organization may be new to some of you may have heard of us, some of you may have not. So I just wanted to share a little bit about who we are and how we engage with the community and our clients and our mission. So let's start with our mission statement. Very excited to share this with you. This is a brand new mission statement. Public Counsel just wrapped up earlier this spring strategic planning process, which laid out values and goals for the next 5 years. And one of the things that came out of that strategic planning was an updated mission statement. And I won't read it all to you. As you can see, you could spend some time with it reading it. I just wanted to uplift a few key pieces that stand out to me and that really speak to the work that we do and that centers all of the way that we engage and work with the community and clients. First, I just wanted to name that we were founded in 1950, and we are located in Koreatown neighborhood of Los Angeles, about 4 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. And what stands out for me that I wanted to uplift was the piece around advancing civil rights and racial and economic justice. That the piece about pro bono legal service model being an important part of our mission and really being a part from the very beginning. It was part of our foundation and continues to be an important part of the way that we provide services. And then the last piece is providing direct legal services and supporting community-led efforts to transform systems. I think that is important to note that while we do provide direct and individual legal representation, we always have an eye out for dismantling unjust systems through litigation and policy advocacy in and beyond Los Angeles. Next slide. So how do we work towards our mission? We use a mixed and interconnected advocacy methods. We provide direct legal services. We work with individual clients. We also engage in impact litigation and systemic policy advocacy. And I really appreciate this mixed method model because when we are seeing patterns on the ground via our direct legal services, it's really wonderful to have strong impact litigation team and strong policy advocacy teams that we can think through how can we collaborate to address the root causes of the patterns of issues that we're seeing on the direct and individual cases. So it really does inform and is centered in the clients and the community. Really do inform where our impact litigation strategies and systemic policy advocacy strategies will land. And again, all centering around the mission that we just reviewed. We have 8 different legal projects, and our teams include legal, social work, and organizing staff. And we partner with pro bono resources to deepen the impact, and we are committed to a trauma-informed legal advocacy model and strategies. So now I'm going to share a little bit about what law and social work and our interdisciplinary legal advocacy model looks like at Public Counsel. So social work, we were founded in 1950. And we have had social work integrated into our legal services for over 30 years. There are currently 5 staff social workers in 2 projects who practice within an interdisciplinary approach. And those 2 projects that have social workers are our Children's Rights Project and our Immigrants' Rights Project. In addition to our staff social work, we also have a Masters of Social Work intern cohort. We partner with local Masters of Social Work graduate programs, and we are an agency that receives master's level students that need to complete practicum instruction hours, and we work with them, and I supervise the students, and we just onboarded our brand new cohort last week, and they'll be working with teams that don't have staff social work and exploring and building up those foundations for hopefully future staff social. The goal is always to bring on more staff social workers. Social workers, public counsel provide direct services in furtherance of the legal work and function within attorney-client privilege. And I'll go into what that means for confidentiality and mandated reporter in the next slide. Our integration of social work into legal services provides professional psychosocial support to enable our clients to effectively participate in the legal process and achieve their goals. This is a really important point, is just that acknowledgement that if clients are coming to us, they're very likely and often do have complex underlying unmet needs that could get in the way of their active participation in the legal process. And our commitment to collaboration really is one that let's provide as much as a holistic advocacy model we can so they can be engaged and work and collaborate and be a part and take ownership of their legal process. And a lot of times that means needs that an attorney can't respond to or is not trained to, and that's where we find those opportunities to integrate the social work expertise and integration in those cases. And again, this goes to the next point of really see this as an interdisciplinary model that promotes holistic and trauma-informed representation. And in addition to working on individual cases with legal teams, our social work team also offers training to support all staff on creating an environment where we're discussing compassion fatigue, we're discussing what trauma-informed practice is, client-centered ideology, boundary settings, how to do that effectively, how to name them, how they're part of being trauma-informed. The boundaries are very important, and skills for working with clients in crises and much more. Next slide. So I mentioned I was going to go a little bit more into what this means as far as the way that social workers integrate into legal teams at public counsels for confidentiality requirements. So especially given that we are a California-based organization. So as I mentioned, public counsel social work staff and interns and volunteers, they may provide services to clients only in furtherance of the legal work conducted for clients by public counsel's legal teams. And in providing such services, public counsel social workers are acting as part of the legal team rather than a separate professional social work capacity. And so we must adhere by attorney-client privileges and everything that and public counsel follows the confidentiality obligations as outlined by the California Business and Professional Codes. So what this means is that we are mandated by attorney-client privilege. Everything that an attorney has to keep confidential, social worker, that applies to social workers as well. And at times, this may conflict with the obligations that a social worker might otherwise have under mandated reporter provisions of, as I mentioned here in California, the California Child Abuse and Neglect and Reporting Act. So what that means, if we were to receive any kind of information throughout the course of our work in the legal case that might otherwise be reportable under that CANRA, then it is public counsel's policy that if the client does not give us permission to disclose information, then we should preserve the protected attorney-client relationship by refraining from reporting under CANRA or reporting to any, or even just disclosing information to a relative, a caregiver, or reaching out to a crisis hotline for help on the client's behalf. So the key piece here is that client consent. If they do not wish for us to disclose or discuss this with anyone else, we cannot, even if it is, might fall under mandated reporting. But the other side to that is if a client does give us permission and we have client consent, we document that file, we discuss with our legal teams, and then we can go ahead and disclose. But the key piece here is that the client will drive that, and we can, that will drive whether or not they wish to keep information confidential or not.
Great, thank you, Judy. So I'm going to speak now a little bit more about the team I'm a part of, which is the Pro Bono Asylum team, and specifically my role as the social worker on that team and how we've integrated social work into the pro bono work we do. And I'll say here, and we'll kind of echo this throughout the presentation, but the goal is just to provide this as like one model. This is how we've done it in our particular context, and recognize different pro bono contexts may look different. Social work integration models may look different, but hopefully for organizations kind of exploring how to integrate social work in the pro bono space, this can provide some examples or spark some ideas. So our Pro Bono Asylum team is housed within our Immigrants' Rights Project, which is one of the 8 projects Judy was mentioning. We currently have 3 attorneys on our team and myself as the social worker. We've had social work support on the team since about 2016. And roughly speaking, I have a full scope caseload of around 10 to 12 families in various sizes of families with various ages represented, and then provide other limited scope support as needed. And I'll go into more details of what both of those look like. The overall kind of purpose of my team is to provide holistic legal technical assistance on pro bono placed cases. We do some in-house direct rep work on the team as well. Often there are cases that have a portion of the case placed with a pro bono, and we'll handle a portion of the case in-house. And there are a small number of like exclusively in-house cases on the team as well. Currently, we're serving a mixture of affirmative and defensive non-detained asylum seekers and families in removal proceedings. Asylum, as is in our title, and is kind of the main type of legal work my team is involved in, but there's many other forms of relief that many of these families are eligible, including U visas, special immigrant juvenile status, VAWA, and other forms of relief that we're also involved in, or we're providing TA to technical assistance to the pro bono. So I'm going to speak a little bit about our holistic technical assistance model. I know there's a lot of words on the screen. The hope is just to provide this as a resource that you all can refer back to and get more examples from. So I'm not going to read all of this, but I do want to just review kind of the categories involved in this holistic technical assistance. The first is that we do the initial intake with all of the individuals and families we work with, and then from there place the case with the pro bono teams. And as part of that placement, provide a placement packet that has information about the client's story, suggested legal arguments and strategies, important deadlines, or sample and training materials. And then the legal technical assistance involves a lot of different things, helping pro bono attorney, reviewing pro bono attorney filings, updating pro bonos about kind of the ever-changing immigration landscape, also screening for eligibility, and potentially either taking on representation or referring clients when they are eligible for additional forms of relief, or supporting the pro bonos if they decide to take on those additional forms of relief as well, such as a U visa would be a common example of that. Also helping the pro bonos find and connect with experts, whether country condition experts or mental health professionals. And then part of our holistic technical assistance model is my work as the social worker. And we frame that as both social work technical assistance to the pro bonos and direct client support. The technical assistance involves identifying and implementing client-centered and trauma-informed engagement and communication strategies, and providing trainings, best practice guides, and identifying resources and referrals. And then I'll, in the next slide, go more into the direct client support. So the majority of the 10 to 12 families I was mentioning that I provide this full scope social work support to are Central American families with pro bono placed cases, and some also have in-house components of the cases, whether it's something more limited, like we handle EAD renewals in-house, for example, sometimes, or whether it's something like a U visa or VAWA. My social work activities involve a wide range of things. All of this is always within the scope Judy was referring to, that I work housed within our legal technical assistance team, and all of the work I do is in furtherance of our legal technical assistance to the pro bono attorneys, or in furtherance of our direct representation to the clients on the pieces of the case we handle in-house. Broadly speaking, I can support clients' social and emotional well-being as they navigate the legal process, and promote as much as possible a client-centered legal process, elevating clients' questions and concerns, recognizing that legal systems we're working within are like very much not client-centered, very much not trauma-informed, but helping to make as much as possible, advocating as much as possible for the pro bono relationship with the clients to be trauma-informed, and for clients to have as much agency and say in the process as is available. This also involves things like supporting clients in preparing emotionally for hearings, testimony, or interviews, or anything that could potentially be re-traumatizing. It's also about helping clients access and gather resources and documentation related to their legal case, recognizing that something that may sound very straightforward, just getting this documentation, could involve, having to interact with some other agency that's also not very trauma-informed or client-centered, or having to tell their story to yet another person that they don't have any rapport or trust with. So supporting clients through that process. Or even just like with technological access, like if you need a computer to access a certain document, for example. Broadly speaking, it's helping clients identify and utilize their strengths to achieve their goals. I think all of our social work, we try to make as strength-based as possible. Facilitating access to educational, medical, mental health, and other services, and assisting clients in applying for benefits and services or accessing referrals as needed. And then lastly, I am involved in crisis intervention as well, when needed on a case, so helping clients connect with any urgent resources, either related to mental health or housing or other common issues that may come up, and kind of tapping into whatever strengths and support networks they already have. So I want to provide a couple of examples, recent examples of that direct client support on pro bono placed cases, or cases that have both pro bono placed and in-house components. One example is of a client who has not had work authorization for a long time because of various complications in her legal case, and hopefully will soon be able to have work authorization, but doesn't yet. So as the legal team is, working on that, as Rachel's providing legal technical assistance on that, I'm supporting the clients in what does that mean for her practically and for her children. So one recent example was she got kicked out of the housing situation she was in and had to find new housing without having stable employment. So, thankfully she had a really strong social network, and she was able to utilize those resources to find a landlord who was willing to rent to her. And then I was able to help her access through one of our partners a month's rent and a security deposit to get into that apartment. And then it's also thinking through, as she's waiting for this work authorization, what financial support can she get to kind of ease the burden of paying for rent? So things like utility bill assistance, food assistance, and childcare assistance. Another example, and this is not one client, but many of our clients in the asylum world right now are having their defensive asylum cases dismissed and are now reapplying affirmatively, or applying affirmatively for the first time. And that has lots of impacts for, just day-to-day life and people's goals. Many people had driver's licenses based on the work authorization they had through the case that was dismissed. So what does that mean as they have to wait now for applying again for work authorization through the new affirmative application? So providing DMV accompaniment to families in that position, and navigating educational impacts. Often there's clients who financial aid depended on their immigration status, and what does that look like in this in-between space? So helping people advocate for their own needs and kind of explain their situation to the university or whoever might be evaluating their eligibility for resources. And lastly, I think unfortunately common situation clients face is experiencing being victims of crime here in the United States. First and foremost, when I become aware of that, or a client lets me know of that, it's making sure they're connecting with their pro bono legal team to inform them about whatever happened. And that team can, screen them for eligibility of, potentially U visa or some other form of relief they may be newly eligible for. And Rachel can kind of simultaneously be providing the legal technical assistance to help the pro bonos understand options available and legal strategies they might pursue. And then it's also in my role kind of providing the support as the client is navigating like the impacts of the crime on them. So whether it's accessing physical and mental health services, navigating loss of work, accessing available benefits and resources, or just providing like emotional, psychosocial support to clients as they navigate and interact with criminal and civil justice systems. And then the last piece I'm going to touch on is just a few examples of what social work technical assistance has looked like. So this is kind of the technical assistance, social work technical assistance I'm providing to the pro bono attorneys that kind of goes along with and in furtherance of our legal technical assistance. So like I mentioned, I do sometimes provide trainings. One that I've done was around merits hearing prep. I can also provide support to the pro bono attorneys around asylum interview prep or testimony prep. It's also navigating the intersections of the legal case and clients' mental health and social context. Often, clients accessing benefits or resources or showing like positive assets in their life can be beneficial to the legal case. So helping make those connections. Again, always, following clients' agency and self-determination and whatever that looks like. Another just very practical example is many of our clients qualify for fee waivers for different applications. But to get the fee waiver, they need to show that they have active Medi-Cal. So that can be very straightforward, or it can be a little convoluted depending on the situation. So I can provide technical assistance around how to do that.
Thanks, Carrie. So now that we've kind of set the stage or give you a little bit of insight of what social work integration looks like at Public Counsel, and particularly in our pro bono asylum team, I'm going to spend some time just kind of walking you all through how we are working to improve and strengthen our social work integration across the organization, and really, what that means for Carrie's pro bono asylum team. So as we've established, social work has been a part of Public Counsel's legal advocacy model for over 30 years. Carrie's team has been integrating social work and pro bono partnerships since 2016. But what's been missing throughout our social work history at Public Counsel is really someone in a position to be able to systematize and look across the organization and really think through how can we move away from having social work be done in individual projects and be siloed, but what are some things that can be systematized across the organization while still acknowledging that different projects have different needs and the way that they engage with their clients, and so having some customization as well to meet those needs of what the social work role can be. So last March of 2022, this new position was created, the Director of Social Work role. And this is really for the first time in our history, having social work in a management position to be able to look at those pieces and see how everyone can fit together and how we can strengthen our social work integration, and not only strengthen, but expand. So I was really fortunate and excited to step into that role after being a staff social worker in our Children's Rights Project for 15 years. And now I'm getting to be able to lead and help the organization and vision a much more integrated and cohesive approach to social work at PC, and as well as with our partnership with our pro bono partners. So the goals of this, I have several goals, but the key goals I wanted to highlight here for you all in the creation of this new position. Again, like you heard me mention, just systematizing social work integration and trauma-informed advocacy strategies across Public Counsel, including within pro bono partnerships. Update and create new policies and procedures that could facilitate that first point, and then also identify opportunities for increased collaboration and transparency. Next slide. And so we are going to just talk about, we're looking at all different kind of pieces when it comes to social work integration at Public Counsel, but we're going to focus on what this has meant and looked like when looking at social work integration within pro bono partnerships. So when I started last year, I started looking closely at all the teams that have social work integration, have social worker on their team, and looking at, how they're, engaging with the legal work, what are the existing integration practices and policies. And, I work really closely with the Carrie's Pro Bono Asylum team because they're currently the only team at Public Counsel that integrates social work into pro bono partnerships. The rest of our social work staff members are integrating into in-house legal cases, so cases that Public Counsel is directly representing. But as Carrie mentioned, in her team, they provide technical assistance to the pro bonos, but the pro bonos are the ones who are holding that representation for the asylum cases. And Carrie is supporting supporting the legal teams in the way that she just described. So in just exploring, and we spent a lot of time, let's walk through what is the history of this team, what is the goal of this team, how is it functioning, how is it engaging, what have been some challenges, what are some areas for improvement, and this is what we identified. We identified that we could have some more intentional and clear explanation of the social workers' confidentiality obligations per Public Counsel policy. We found that you can never repeat ourselves enough around what confidentiality means for Public Counsel social workers, just because it is so nuanced, especially here in California, as I mentioned with CANRA, improving our communication around the role that the social worker plays in the case. Again, it's really nuanced. Social work in the law, it's not that clear. It can be confusing. What does that mean? What role can a social worker play? So being able to enhance that communication and education around the role that the social worker can play, and an opportunity for creating a mechanism for a mutual agreement among all parties, not just with pro bonos and our social worker, but also clients around the expectations and the roles of each person when working in an interdisciplinary team. And so as a result of our findings and our identified areas of improvement, we thought we could address this by creating a new policy for integration of social work into cases placed with volunteer attorneys. And you'll hear me oscillate between pro bono and volunteer attorneys, but I'm using them interchangeably in this space. Next slide. So when we were thinking through, and when we spent a lot of time talking about the policy, and this was a lot of just reflecting on how the relationship has gone, and again, areas of improvement. And we thought we would like to develop a policy with the following goals. One is to make sure and create a pathway for any clients that are being served by volunteer attorneys or pro bonos have access to a holistic and trauma-informed legal representation. And this is what I mean by this is not, everyone, all of our pro bonos, we partner with so many, is going to be able to have a social worker. We don't have that capacity, but on teams that do have a social worker on staff, like the Pro Bono Asylum team that have Carrie, let's create that pathway and have that be clear and laid out so that the PBA pro bonos can reach out and understand what the role of a social worker is and how we can think through which cases, right, we would be able to have Carrie support that team in. Again, that's to the next bullet point of the policy providing guidance on how social work can be integrated into the different kinds of existing relationships. We have various types of, three main types of relationships with volunteer pro bono attorneys. One is that we place a legal case, an asylum case, with the pro bono, but there is some element that we'll keep in-house or some component of the case. For example, a public counsel attorney might assist with a work permit renewal or another legal element that we'll keep in-house. And so that makes it easier for Carrie to integrate. She'll follow our internal social work integration policies. That same goes for co-counsel cases where we are co-counsel, so we're sharing the legal representation. Another another clear way that social work can be integrated through our internal and in-house social work procedures. But there's that third kind of relationship that we have with pro bonos, where the pro bono is the case is exclusively placed with pro bonos. There's no in-house or co-counsel element. And so really being able to design guidance on what that integration looks like, since it can be so unclear and nuanced. And again, the big piece for us was that transparency about that social workers will adhere to public counsel confidentiality requirements when engaging in social work support with pro bonos, even in those cases where there is no in-house or co-counsel element to the cases. We found throughout this process that we can never repeat this enough, right? It's confusing, and especially for attorneys who may not understand, and really needing that reiteration of what those expectations around confidentiality and communication are for social workers at public counsel. And finally, the policy we thought to include some element to memorialize social work engagement via an agreement for cases that are exclusively placed with pro bonos, so that everyone is on the same page. Next slide. So the agreement that we thought through and created is, the policy says we have, this team has a social worker on the team. If you're interested in referring, you're working with a case that you suspect may need social work support, it lays out that, you would need to enter into an agreement with public counsel and public counsel social worker. And that agreement is designed to outline the role that the social worker can play in cases that they're representing, provide, again, the confidentiality obligations, repeating at every opportunity that we can so that everyone is clear, offer clarification on the roles and communications between all parties. What does it mean if Carrie receives information and or vice versa? How is that communicated to the attorney, or if the attorney receives information? And really just having everyone, again, being on the same page, having it be as a collaborative process as possible, while centering the client's needs and centering client choice, and enhancing the capacity of the pro bono team to provide holistic and trauma-informed representation to the client.
So now I'm going to speak a bit about the implications of this new policy and new agreement that we're rolling out for social work integration specifically. I think, like Judy was mentioning, really the goal is to deepen the integration of myself as a social worker and our pro bono attorney. It's a reminder for the clients and the legal teams of my role and scope and confidentiality, making sure we're on the same page of that. Like Judy was saying, kind of have clearly established plans for communication. It's also an opportunity to revisit goals and potential areas for collaboration and support. And this is kind of involving all the different parties. So whether, it helps identify opportunities for like our legal technical assistant, my social work technical assistants to the pro bono attorneys, making sure they're aware of kind of the range of social work technical assistance I can be providing to them. And for the clients too, to get a reminder of kind of my role and scope of practice, and have that conversation with them and their attorneys of how I can best support their legal case. And it's continuing to build out the social work technical assistance piece specifically. I think my role was kind of originally designed thinking primarily of the direct client support. And we've been kind of growing and expanding this technical assistance piece, social work technical assistance piece, and kind of what role I can play to support the pro bono attorneys. And I think that's something we want to continue growing and building. Broadly speaking, I think the goals of the social work technical assistance are to encourage the whole team to think through implications of the legal case for clients' lives, for clients to also have the opportunity to really be presented with the possibilities, the uncertainties, what might be best for the legal case, but also be able to think through what other impacts does this have for my life, my children's lives, our goals, and like anything else related to things that they're working towards. And so it's really centering client agency and self-determination in this process. It's also thinking critically about how to make the process more trauma-informed. So providing pro bonos with tools and education to be able to do that throughout the process, and also being able to provide that direct psychosocial and emotional support to the client as they're engaging in things that can often be very re-traumatizing or challenging systems to navigate. And then, as Judy was mentioning too, I think that another big goal of this is to explore how to increase equitable access to social work services across the Pro Bono Asylum team. So many of my cases that are kind of the full scope cases have to do with a grant that previously existed that no longer exists. So that in and of itself kind of frees up the possibility of looking at how we can increase equitable access to my services to potentially any clients across our teams, working with any of our attorneys or any of our pro bono teams to have access to social work services if they would like, or if it's something they identify as a need. Also recognizing the other big limiting factor here is my own capacity. I'm one social worker and have to work within my, what fits in a full-time job. So that obviously limits the extent to which I can provide support to all clients. But I think as much as possible, we want to make that process equitable. So, able to prioritize clients with the most need and most interest in getting social work support, and kind of still having free space in my schedule to be able to support in like limited capacity ways when things come up for other clients or for other pro bono teams that I may not be providing like the whole range of holistic support to. And I think a big goal of this is also to work towards more proactive engagement with the goal of being able to connect with clients, connect with pro bono teams before a client is experiencing a crisis. So often when I am connected to a new client or when a pro bono reaches out to ask for social work support, it's after something has already happened. Maybe they had a conversation with the client and are worried now that the client is, thinking about suicide, for example. Unfortunately, it can be a situation that comes up and where people reach out for my engagement. So thinking through, how can we help this client access resources maybe, before they reach that point. Another kind of common example that can come up is a pro bono team will reach out because the client is kind of imminently at risk of losing their housing or has already lost their housing. So thinking through, are there ways to help identify maybe someone is in an insecure housing situation before it reaches that point of being like an actual crisis or something needing a more urgent response. And that's also obviously like within the scope of, all of this is within the scope of the legal services, but recognizing people's lives, so many aspects of people's lives impact other aspects of their lives, and something like losing housing or experiencing a mental health crisis like directly impacts their ability to participate in the legal case and achieve whatever outcomes their legal team is working towards.
So now we're going to get to the piece on just what we've learned. I think this is the most important part of the presentation to us. It's just kind of shared learning and sharing the lessons that we've learned, because to our knowledge, we're on the cutting edge of this work. And what we mean by that is, yes, pro bono integration, social work, it has been integrated in co-counsel cases and even cases that have some in-house elements. But what we're trying to address is, how do we integrate social work into cases that are exclusively represented by pro bonos? And we've asked around and we've asked partners. And so if anyone is doing this work, please raise your hand and chime in. But there wasn't anything really to reference. And so we're building as we go, as the saying goes, right? Building the plane as we're flying it. And it's extremely challenging. And even though we've been doing this work, again, social work for over 30 years, and the Pro Bono Asylum team since 2016, this is the first time that we're having all these collaborative eyes looking at how do we really figure this out and create in a way that is trauma informed, that is very clear around transparency, collaboration, roles, obligations around confidentiality. And it takes a lot of time. And I mentioned I can't underestimate how much time and collaboration has gone into this process. Internally, these are all the folks that have been working on this project and developing this policy and helping us think through. It's our, internally, the whole Pro Bono Asylum team. It all started with them just sitting and like walking us all through the history of the team, the goals of the team, the structure of the team, and even just the different kinds of engagement that they have and relationships they have with the pro bono partners, and really saw them as the experts of those pro bono relationships. The director of social work, myself, as a new position, was able to sit and be a part of this process. Our director of pro bono is involved, our chief of litigation and legal programs, our general counsel, we have worked with a legal ethics consultant to help us, think through some legal ethics challenges. And so it really is a lot of time and resources that requires, this requires a lot of care, right? A lot of intention. And, we also learned that the firm's pro bono's coordinators play a key role in working with them to increase awareness of social work role and scope and the value of social work integration, the awareness of those ethics and best practices and importance of clear policies. We did outreach emails when we rolled out the new policy. We hosted an open house where we invited our pro bono partners to come and ask questions about this new policy, just acknowledging that we're shifting a little bit, right, in our relationship, and really creating that space for them to be curious and ask questions, and and being ready and fielding those questions and facilitating dialogue. And that's where we are. So we launched this policy over the summer, and I'm coming to you live from, we're still trying to figure this out, right? There are a lot of valid and great questions that are coming up that may lead to us even adjusting our policy that we created. And so I just wanted to name that we are really open to exploring, new ways of engaging with our pro bono partners when it comes to social work integration, and really, open to, thinking through what are ways that we could improve and that continuous exploration that we want to be sure that we're intentional to make sure that we are being trauma informed and everything is centered around the client's needs. And the last bullet point that I'll review, and then I'll hand it over to Carrie, is once we do roll out a policy, and anytime we need to make a plan for follow through and implementation, like what are some supports? How can we support our pro bonos? And what do our teams need to be able to implement the new way that we're engaging with our pro bono partners via this new policy and agreements?
Yeah, so I think along with that last point, and this is kind of like the overall thing guiding us, but also like specifically something we're thinking about in the context of this new policy and agreement as we're rolling it out and as we're figuring out, what will work best moving forward. But is this idea of centering our clients in all of our conversations and decisions. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors to consider. There's like what the legal firms, pro bono firms are comfortable with. The legal ethics, the social work ethics, like any laws or policies we're operating under. But making sure in the midst of all of that, we're centering our clients and making sure they also have a say in kind of what the impacts of this are for their immigration case, whether they want a social worker supporting on the case in the first place, making sure that that's a conversation between all of the parties and ultimately comes down to what the clients want and identify something that's helpful for them as they're navigating the legal case. And recognizing too, I think this agreement in and of itself, like it helps, like Judy was saying, memorialize things. But then we need to also carry that out in practice. And as we carry it out in practice, making sure that how it's carried out, like does continually center the clients, and that, they're also aware of this agreement and scope of practice, and get to decide for themselves, within the realm of what's possible based on our scope, what sort of support they'd like to be receiving, and for the pro bono teams also to identify what sort of support is most helpful for them. Just that I think a piece that we're aware of going into this, but also just helpful to remind ourselves of is, whenever we're making changes to kind of the way things are done, there's always the potential for resistance to changing those established norms and practices. Social work integration, and this is true, I think, both for in-house social work integration and for particularly social work integration in this pro bono context, is that it takes effort. And when the more effort we can put into it, the more open communication and collaboration between the clients, the social worker, the legal team, the better outcomes we can have, the better we can help support clients in their goals, the better we can, make sure they have access to the resources they need to achieve whatever they're hoping to achieve through the legal case. But that does take effort, and we're working within systems where people are already often at capacity or way over capacity. There's a lot of burnout. So those are just like a constant thing to navigate and balance, recognizing this is something that's worth the effort, but also it can be hard to make changes that do require some extra communication and collaboration, even though we strongly believe that there's real benefits that come from when we're able to implement that. And then along with that, we're definitely learning as we kind of roll out this initial first steps of putting this policy into place and the agreement into place, is that we need to approach the work with humility. We've been framing this as a pilot, in the sense that we recognize this is our first time rolling this out, and we're going to be getting feedback that can be helpful and help us kind of make any necessary changes to make sure this is something that makes sense within the systems we're all operating within. So yeah, trying to have an openness to receive that feedback, be able to reflect on anything we learned from that, and be responsive to whatever questions or concerns are coming up or needs are coming up, or things that we may not have, identified from our position, but that, firms could potentially identify or the clients I work with could identify. And along with that, it's just making sure that whatever policies and practices we're establishing work for all of our parties. So work for the pro bono law firms we partner with, work for the clients that we're all serving, and work for public counsel and our own social work policy and the kind of model we have for social work integration. And then along with that, the big takeaway is this isn't like a one-size-fits-all thing. I think it's something that even for ourselves internally, is changing and developing as we get feedback and as we roll it out and kind of figure out what's going to work best moving forward for us. But even that is very much based on our specific context and practice model, recognizing the way legal service organizations do pro bono can look a lot of different ways. The way social workers are integrated in the legal immigration context can also look a lot of different ways. There's not a one answer that will work for every organization. And the other big point is that we're all operating in different states and different contexts where, even the laws and ethics we're looking at are different based on different contexts. So that also impacts, what sort of outcome is possible and what sort of models or policies to support those models will work best. So this is kind of our approach as we're learning and growing into it, based on our specific context for our work and the specific models we've been working with.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that you heard me mention at the beginning of the presentation that we just wrapped up a strategic planning process earlier this spring. And this really does tie to a lot of what we are hoping to continuously look at and explore is how do we strengthen our pro bono partners. We acknowledge that is a big part of our identity and the way that we are able to serve clients. And so what I appreciate of, the timing of being able to work on this project and policy within as part of a larger organizational, work towards our strategic plan to really just have those key roles and collaboration strengthened throughout the organization. So I think that also matters of like paying attention to where is your organization, what is the mission, is there a strategic plan, and how can we tie? Because I think that has really facilitated these natural conversations. It's not like an extra thing, right? But this is really about strategic planning and implementation. And this is part of that work, and it really helped to bring everyone to the table and have these thoughtful conversations. So we're intentional about making our presentation a little bit under the hours so we can make space for questions. So we're right on target with our time. We had left 10 minutes, but yeah, we'd love to hear any comments or questions that you may have. We have plenty of time. Well, I'm curious to get our brains going. But you can just we're not going to do a poll, just by a show of hands. Can you unpin us? Sorry, Laura, so I could see the participants. Thank you. With a show of hands, how many folks on the call work with social or at legal organizations that integrate social work? Okay. Great, we see a few hands. Great. Yeah, we were just curious about who would be in the room, so some of this is familiar. Great.
Yeah, I think we'd love to hear if anyone is comfortable either coming off mute or sharing in the chat, any models your organizations have. Particularly if anyone else is exploring social work in the pro bono space, but also like broadly speaking social work in the immigration space, would love to hear. Or if this sparked any like thoughts or ideas folks have for ways their own organizations can be exploring these topics.
Hello, I have a quick question for you guys. My name is Estefania Higgins, and I'm the Senior Managing Attorney for the Pro Bono Program with Catholic Charities DC. And I was wondering, like, how many cases, so you mentioned your caseload as a social worker is like 12 active cases. How big is your pro bono program? Like, how many cases are you placing pro bono with pro bono attorneys?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. I don't have the exact number right now. It's kind of been in flux. But it's, in the 100 or a couple hundred of cases, yeah, like roughly around 200, let's say maybe a little less, in my sub project. So within the Immigrants' Rights Project, there's a lot more pro bono cases, and within Public Counsel, there's many more pro bono cases. But on my team, it's in that range. So yeah, I guess that means roughly it's like 10% of the cases, maybe a little bit less, are getting social work support currently. So that does fit into this kind of question around how to make sure social work services are equitable, because we've kind of played with different models around, is it better if I provide much more limited support to many more people, or is it better if I provide more holistic support to fewer families? And the kind of 10 to 12 families I'm working with, again, this can be, there may be, multiple asylum cases within that family. There may be other dependents on cases. There could be U visas, CILA. So there's often like multiple cases going on within like each of the families I work with. But like many of those families were identified because they like specifically were looking for social work support, or experiencing like some very complex intersections of like, whether it's related to mental health or housing or just other complex situations in their lives that identified, their legal team identified this might be a good fit to have a little extra support from me as a social worker. And then always, like I work with those families because those families like spoke with me and heard about my role and consented to having social work support. and likewise the pro bonos, you know, we're aware and comfortable with me working with them and the clients. So yeah, that's one of the questions we're exploring now. Is I think ideally we want to find like a balance between making sure I can provide that kind of holistic support, recognizing like when I can build rapport over time with the pro bono team, with the clients, really understand the legal case, like there's a lot of benefits that come from that. But I don't want to exclusively focus on those full scope cases because we want to be able to like pivot and be responsive. Or potentially, you know, maybe one of those families was dealing with something quite complex and now they're in a much more stable position. Looking at the possibility of like closing out the social work case and potentially then having capacity to take on another more like full scope social work case with a different family or individuals based on like newly identified needs. So yeah, that's one of the things I think we've been thinking a lot about is how to balance like being able to provide more in-depth holistic support with having, you know, many more clients on the team who potentially would be interested in or could benefit from social work support.
Thank you. Do you guys at this moment offer just like not as, you know, deep and in-depth support to each person on board that would offer more assistance, you know, to try to like cover more of the other clients, or no, right now you're focusing on having on this model specifically?
Sorry, I think I missed the beginning of that question. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, do you have another like social worker on staff as well that offers more support to like the other cases that your pro bonos hold, or right now you're focusing on this model where you provide more like a little bit more support to, you know, those 10 to 12 families?
Yeah, for now I'm the only social worker on our like our pro bono asylum team. So like I do, like I was mentioning, like when other cases come up that need support, you know, potentially they could be added into that 10 to 12 if there's a need for like more holistic support, or more commonly like a pro bono or a client will identify, you know, they're experiencing a housing crisis or the pro bono is having trouble getting the client enrolled in Medi-Cal, or, you know, things like that will come up that they'll loop me in and I'll provide support short term on the case, but not necessarily in like a long-term capacity. But yeah, that is, we're exploring whether, you know, we're in a good, I think, point of transition because we're implementing this policy to look at like, what do we want this model to look like moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
So I realized that this is my first external presentation, so thank you for having us, Laura. And I realized that back in the day, we used to put our contact information on the last slide in case you had any questions for us. So I'm going to put my email, Carrie, let's put our emails in the chat in case anyone has any follow-up questions or, you know, would like to explore this within your own organizations. We're really just about, you know, like Carrie said, sparking questions and conversations, and would be happy to share more information about, you know, how we approach social work at Public Counsel, particularly around this topic.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing and presenting today. It's really interesting to hear about this innovative program and exciting to hear how this, like you said, might spark among other organizations to be used. So thank you so much for this fantastic information.